No, that sounds about it. Like I said, oh, sorry, go ahead. I mean, that's a loaded question. I mean, we've got 75 years of animation history that you can be looking at. Disney stuff, in particular, old Disney stuff is very, very expensive. Know your dealers, trust your sources. There are a lot of really great animation houses out there who sell a lot of the older Disney art, but it's very, very expensive. My friend Tommy and I have been looking at Disney art quite a bit and drooling and wishing we had the funds to put into it. There's some amazing concept pieces, like Disney concept pieces for the stuff, and they're like $15,000. It's just an old. I read a story from some guys, and back in the 80s when animation art was really big in the late 80s, early 90s, and it's kind of died a little bit. But then it was all the Disney and the Warner Brothers stuff that people were really, really super into and excited about. And this guy was telling me they'd go to these auctions, and in the back of the auction, these guys would wait till all the cherry pieces would come out, and it was basically George Lucas's buyer and Michael Jackson's buyer. And they would sit in the back, and they'd just sit there, and they'd raise their cards, and they'd outbid each other over and over and over and over again. The days of those prices have gone down a lot. I mean, who's going to compete with George Lucas for buying animation art? It's kind of got unlimited funds there, same with Michael Jackson. But the days of those $150,000 Disney pieces are probably long gone. What's nice about it, there's kind of been a bit of a resurgence in animation art collecting. All those old guys who were really into the old art, they're not really around anymore. They kind of dropped off a little bit. A lot of us younger guys who are late 20s, early 30s, we're getting into we were the 80s generation. It was 80s cartoons that were half-hour toy commercials that led us to be here today. We're all like toy nerds. This is what we love. So a lot of us have gone, and now we want to get the cells and the cartoons that we love as kids. So there's a bit of a resurgence in animation art collecting. They don't quite go for the prices that they used to, but there's starting to be a lot more interest. So yeah, just keep an eye out. Pick a series that you're interested in, and do a little bit of research. See what's out there. My biggest thing is if you're looking for something that's got an original background as well as the original cells, try to make sure the background matches. More often than not, there's a lot of original backgrounds that have survived, but they're paired with cells that don't actually match. Sometimes the images look great. I've got a droid cell for sale right now. It looks great. It's 2-layer cell. It's original background. It's a Jan Tosh cell, so it's from the first 8 episodes that are pretty rare. It looks really good, but it doesn't match at all. So just be really careful when you're looking at something. Make sure that it all matches. Any other questions? Yeah. What's that? Basically, they found it. They were like, hey, we all of a sudden found pallets, literally pallets of Ewok cells just sitting around. Like, what are we going to do with these? And that was their big promotion. It's like, okay, well, we'll just send it out with the fan club. The bulk of the stuff that wasn't given out at the fan club was then shifted to Celebration 3, where we gave them out as the collector panels in Celebration 3. So that's where a lot of that stuff kind of went from. It was found, it went to the fan club, and then it was Celebration 3.
Did we save the best from the fan club?
It was all just mixed. I mean, a lot of the fan club people got absolute crap. Some of them got good stuff. We pulled a lot of good stuff out of Celebration 3, and there was a lot of bad stuff out of Celebration 2 too. So it was just a mix. It was just boxes full of mixed cells. Anyone else? That's a really good question. The question was if there's any advice to storing animation cells or framing animation cells. The biggest thing you got to be worried about is sometimes if it gets warm where the cells were stored, is that the paint will soften up a little bit and it'll stick. So if there's a matching pencil drawing, the paint will then stick to the pencil drawing, and then you got to if you pull it off, you'll either pull the paint and remove the paint from the image, or you'll tear the paper and the paper will go back to the cell. That's the best case scenario, is having the paper tear and going back to the cell. If you're gonna, if that happens, James, did you try this, James? The refrigerator? Yeah, I mean, I haven't had anything that's been really stuck, but one of the recommendations was just basically like putting the cell in the freezer and then pulling it out and using like a humidifier to basically soften the paint so it would, heal up enough so it would take the paper with it. Whether or not you want to be trying that, it's a little tricky. So if you are going to try that, try it with cells that aren't worth anything and that you don't really mind, having a little bit damaged. For just storing, iToya portfolios work really, really well. Some people will go so far as to use rubber gloves and they'll separate every layer and they'll put every layer in every page of their iToya portfolio. Me personally, I just take all 6 layers or however many layers there are and I put it together and I just slide it in the cell. Eventually, I do plan to frame online. And the most important thing when you're framing anything, whether it's animation art or not, is to make sure that you're using acid-free materials, archival quality materials, and that you have a mat because and mats are important for everything. There's a photograph of art because eventually if you get any moisture between the glass and the piece will stick to the glass and then it's ruined. So that mat will keep the piece away from the glass and it will allow for that depth to it.
If you're getting them framed up like that, is it possible to get something like acetate layers in between so that they don't actually stick to each other? So if they're in the frame in the long run, they can still stick, right?
Yeah, and especially depending on what conditions of your house are. If you've got everything in a hot attic, you can run into the problem with one thing, but it's sticking. So it kind of depends on how in depth you want to go. You can use some acetate layers and separate them.
That way, if it sticks, it's only sticking to a clear sheet.
It's only sticking to a clear sheet. Another thought that I had, and I've never tried it, I don't know if anybody has, but I mean, a lot of people do multiple mat layers. So if you've got like a 3-layer cell, put a mat between each cell layer, and it'll actually probably give it a really cool 3D effect as well. So there's different things you can do. If you're going to get framed, don't go to Michael's. Michael's is the McDonald's. It's the McDonald's of framing. It really is. Go to a good, trusted, conservative framer and explain to them what the piece is. Make sure they know what you're leaving with them. Make sure they know that they respect it, and tell them that this is why I want it done this way. This is why it needs to be done this way, and make sure you're walking out of there with a good feeling about leaving yourself behind. Anybody else? Well, go get your cereal boxes.
The technical difficulty was it was not plugged in. So,